Greetings, students. Welcome to the first slideshow presentation for Introduction to American Politics. We start with an introduction to the logic of politics. Today we are going to cover the logic of American politics. Specifically, we will cover the importance of institutional design, constitutions and governments, collective action problems, the cost of collective action, and designing institutions for collective action. Inevitably, our social choices breed conflict. They do so especially when they involve issues that affect the political party's core constituencies. A good example is the congressional battle over tax breaks for the wealthy following the 2010 election. Though Democrats experienced electoral success in 2006 and 2008, the rise of the Tea Party in 2010 saw a swing back to the Republican Party. The poor results for the Democratic Party in the midterm forced them to bend on the contentious issue of tax breaks for the wealthy, where they supported raising taxes and the Republican Party did not. Other contentious issues, such as gun control, gay rights, and abortion, also create gridlock and conflict in our politics. Our system requires mechanisms for preventing gridlock and solving collective action problems. Politics are the process through which individuals and groups reach agreement on a course of common or collective action, even as they disagree on the intended goals of that action. When we refer to political institutions, we are mainly referring to the presidency, Congress, courts, and interest groups. Successful political institutions manage conflict, and stable communities establish rules and procedures for promoting successful collective action. Throughout the political process, interest groups enjoy a temporary advantage and try to permanently implant their preferences in rules and procedures that are difficult to change. For example, President Carter created the Department of Education. President Reagan tried to dismantle it, but could not. A constitution is a set of rules and procedures that institutions must follow to reach and enforce collective action agreements. A government consists of institutions and legally prescribed process for making and enforcing collective action agreements. Governments can include monarchy, representative democracy, theocracy, or dictatorship. Politics involve authority versus power. Authority is the right to make a decision, and power is the influence over government actions. For example, the president has the power to nominate a candidate for the Supreme Court, but they may not have the authority to force the Senate to vote on that candidate. Finally, we should also note that institutions are durable. They outlast their members. What exactly is collective action? Collective actions are the efforts of a group to reach and implement agreements. This requires enough people to decide that action is better than doing nothing, and it requires everyone to share the costs. An example of this is property tax and education funding. We have decided collectively as a society that an educated citizenry is important, and because schools are largely funded through property taxes, everyone shares in the cost of an educated society through property taxes. Collective actions cause problems, such as the prisoner's dilemma, the free rider problem, and the tragedy of the commons. In the prisoner's dilemma, though someone supports a collective undertaking, they are personally better off pursuing an activity that rewards them individually despite undermining the collective effort. The free rider problem occurs when individuals recognize that their small contribution to the collective enterprise will not affect its success or failure. An example of this would be right to work. Right to work legislation allows workers in unionized workplaces to avoid paying dues to a union, which negotiates the pay and benefits on behalf of the worker. The union is still required to negotiate contracts for non members in the unionized workplace, creating an incentive for workers to opt out of the dues but still receive protection from the labor union and still benefit from the contracts that the labor union negotiates. The tragedy of the commons is an individual's costless consumption of a public good which results in its ruination. A common example of this involves fisheries. Each individual has an incentive to catch as many fish as they can. They may know that if the pond is overfished, then the resource will be depleted and no one will be able to fish anymore. But even if they choose to limit themselves, they cannot trust that others will do the same. Government can handle the tragedy of the commons through regulation or privatization. Regulation would include imposing a fishing limit for everyone fishing in the pond. Privatization would involve selling the pond, which would take away the public use of the pond and give the new owner incentive to not deplete their own resource. Some examples of costs associated with collective action are our taxes and costs associated with the judicial system, including court costs and lawyers. Our taxes fund collective action efforts, such as educating children. There are also transaction costs and conformity costs. Transaction costs are the time, effort, and resources required to take collective action. Conformity costs are the extent collective decisions obligate participants to do something that they would rather not. For example, some people may not want to pay their property taxes to fund the local schools because they no longer have children in school. However, they are required to do so to contribute to the collective effort of having an educated population. Our institutions are designed for collective action. Certain members within the institution have command, the power to dictate others' actions. Some have the power to delegate responsibility to another to act on their behalf. There is also the veto power, which gives the authority to block a proposal or stop an action. Agenda control is the power to place proposals before others for their decision. Our institutions also include voting rules, which describe who votes and how many votes it takes to accept a proposal. Representative government is when citizens limit their decisions to the selection of government officials who, acting as their agents, deliberate and commit the citizenry to collective enterprises. Our democracy is large, and too large for everyone to make every policy decision. So we have representative democracy to allow others to act on our behalf. This is different from direct democracy because each citizen does not get to vote on every individual policy proposal. The US system differs from the parliamentary system. In our system, voters directly elect members of the House and the Senate, while also directly electing the president. This system can create gridlock because voters may elect different parties to a majority of each chamber of Congress and elect a president from a party other than that which controls the legislature. In the parliamentary system, the voters only elect the House of Commons. Then, members of the House select the Prime Minister and cabinet members. One party is more likely to control the decisions in the executive and the legislative branch this way. This system is typically more efficient, but may also make it easier for a single party to control all aspects of national government and possibly pass unpopular legislation. Today, we covered collective action and how the U.S. system is designed to make collective action decisions. The next slideshow will cover Chapter 2, the Constitution. Though it is not required in the reading, I recommend you take a look at Appendix 3 in the textbook, which is a copy of the U.S. Constitution.